ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। Chapter 5, verses 1 to 10. Arjuna uvacha sannyasam karmanam Krishna punaryogam cha shamsasi yachreya yetayorekam tanme bruhi sunishchitam. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Sannyasah karma yogascha nishreyasakaravubhau tayostu karma sannyasat karma yogo vishishyate jnyeya sanitya sannyasi yo nadveshthi na kankshati निर्द्वन्द्वो हि महाबाहो सुखं बन्धात् प्रमुच्यते। सांख्ययोगौ पृथक् बालाः प्रवदन्ति न पण्डिताः एकमप्यास्थितः सम्यक् उभयोर्विन्दते फलम्। यत्साङ्ख्यै प्राप्यते स्थानं तद्योगैरपि गम्यते। एकं साङ्ख्यं च योगं च यः पश्यति स पश्यति। संन्यासस्तु महाबाहो दुःखमाप्तुमयोगतः योगयुक्तो मुनिर्ब्रह्मा न चिरेणाधिगच्छति। योगयुक्तो विशुद्धात्मा विजितात्मा जितेन्द्रियः सर्वभूतात्मभूतात्मा कुर्वन्नपि न लिप्यते। नैव किञ्चित् करोमीति युक्तो मन्येत तत्त्ववित्। पश्यन् शृण्वन् स्पृशन् जिघ्नन् अश्नन् गच्छन् स्वपन् श्वसन् प्रलपन् विसृजन् गृह्णन् उन्मिषन् निमिषन्नपि इन्द्रियाणीन्द्रियार्थेषु वर्तन्त इति धारयन् ब्रह्मण्याधाय कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा करोति यः लिप्यते न स पापेन पद्मपत्रमिवाम्भसा। The last we did was the third verse where we understood who is a perpetual sannyasi, isn't it? One who neither hates nor desires, who is free from the pairs of opposites. O Mahabaho, O mighty armed Arjuna, such a person is easily set free from bondage. Nirdvandvo hi Mahabaho sukham bandhat pramuchyate. Free from the opposites that we encounter when we interact with the world. One of the most powerful advices we gathered is when the world presents itself with the opposites, that is the pleasure and pain, joy and sorrow, profit and loss, birth and death, honor and dishonor. This is the world. When all these are presented to us, when the world presents itself, we understood that we must endure them. We must practice this quality of titiksha. Titiksha is to capacity to endure them with a pleasure, with a smile. Understand the impermanence of their nature, that nothing comes to stay. So when you understand that nothing comes to stay and it just passes away, you will not develop an unnecessary identity, an unnecessary identification with it. But the moment you give a sense of permanency to something in life, you have developed an unrealistic attachment or bondage to it, because you have developed a permanency to it. And when that goes away, it hurts you, it bothers you, it torments you. But if you understand that it's a temporary thing, you would establish a relationship that I have got nothing to do with it. It's like you're gone on a holiday to a beautiful location. You have booked yourself a beautiful villa, a beautiful scenic location. Everything's so beautiful. You're only there over the weekend there. You go there, enjoy every bit of it, but you don't develop any identification with it, because you know that's not your permanent abode, isn't it? So if you understand that everything in life is a temporal, in fact, when life itself is uncertain, unsteady, what certainty we have with all that we are dealing with, isn't it? So that was what we dealt with in great detail, right? So let's move on. We will get on with the fourth verse. Keep in mind that the first 7 verses, he's introducing a yogi, a sannyasi, and a jnani. A yogi is a spiritual beginner who is known as an active person. A sannyasi is an ascetic, an advanced seeker. A jnani is an enlightened person. All right. So let's chant verse 4. Sankhya Yoga Prathak Balaha Pravadanti na Panditaha Ekamapyasthita Samyak Ubhayor Vindate Phalam. Sankhya Yoga Prathak Balaha Pravadanti na Panditaha Ekamapyasthita samyak ubhayor vindate phalam. Sankhya Yoga Prithak Balaha. Sankhya and Yoga, which is the path of knowledge and the path of action. The children, Balaha, the spiritual children, not the wise, speak of Sankhya and Yoga as distinct. Only the children speak. He who is truly established in one obtains the fruit of both. Asthitaha. Asthitaha means established. Ekamapyasthita. One who is established in one. Any one of us, he who is established in one, obtains the fruits of both. Now, as I've told you, the spiritual journey. There is no difference between a yogi and a sannyasi. A yogi is a spiritual beginner, and a sannyasi is an advanced spiritual seeker. A spiritual beginner is one who has got loads of desires, loads of vasanas. An advanced seeker has offloaded a fair bit of worldly attractions and worldly temptations. He's not charmed by the world. He has dropped the desires. So sannyasi is just little ahead of a yogi. Yogi is just a beginner. A sannyasi is one little advanced. So he says only the children speak of them as different, as superior, inferior, but the wise man understands they are no different. They are one and the same. Prathak means they are no different. They are one and the same. So it is just a matter of same path, a different stage. They are only differing in degree, but not in kind. You must understand that. The spiritual path, where one is way ahead, one is little behind, but they are both differing in only degree, not in kind. It's just like a person who, you know, there's a train in Malaysia. You take from the very heart of city, you go to Singapore, the train that goes. So there is a station called the KL Central, where from the heart of Kuala Lumpur city, you can board the train. It's an overnight, you can choose to take an overnight journey, or it's a 5-hour journey, you can get there. And just before you leave Malaysia, there is a border city called Johor Bahru. And then there is an immigration check. And then you enter Singapore, there's another immigration check because you're entering another country. Now, just for discussion's sake, let's say Singapore is self-realization. Just for discussion's sake, I have not taken the local trains here to take stations of names which you and I know. You may know, but I do not know. So I'm just familiar with certain names, I'm just taking them. So KL Central, a person who boards the train in KL Central, and there is a midway town called Ipoh. I think Ipoh doesn't come, this other direction. I think other direction would be, let's say, Malacca. Okay, there's another town, like 2 hours drive from Kuala Lumpur is Malacca. Midway. And then there is the last station, you're in the almost entering Singapore. Now, what you must understand is a person who boards the train in Kuala Lumpur in KL Central is a, it should not be difficult to answer this. Gayatri Ma, a person who boards the train in KL Central is a, don't tell me, I have never boarded, so how would I know? I don't want that answer. Huh? A person who boards the train in KL Central is a yogi. I couldn't hear you, but I'm only guessing with your...
He's a yogi.
Correct, correct. A person who boards a train in Central is yogi. A person who boards a train in Malacca is a
Sannyasi.
sannyasi. And both these people are going to meet someone who's already in Singapore. He is a
Jnani.
Jnani. All that. So it is not that they are different journeys. It's not that they are different paths. The same path, a different stage. It's just that he has started little ahead of you. That's about all. Balaha, the ignorant people. The ignorant people think the path of knowledge is superior to path of action. The path of action is inferior to path of knowledge. There is nothing like that. All paths lead you to the same goal. Wherever you are, ultimately you'll have to merge with the self. Okay, so the message is very simple, down to earth. A yogi evolves into a sannyasi, into a jnani, which is realization. All we've got to understand is, as you reduce your desires, you spiritually evolve. That's about all. All right, let's move on. Yat Sankhya Prapyate Sthanam Tadhyogairapi Gamyate Ekam Sankhyam Cha Yogam Cha Yah Pashyati Sa Pashyati. Yat Sankhya Prapyate Sthanam Tadhyogairapi Gamyate Ekam Sankhyam Cha Yogam Cha Yah Pashyati Sa Pashyati. Now we will chant one more time because we have got the verse now displayed on the screen for you all. Okay, let's chant once together. Yat Sankhya Prapyate Sthanam Tadhyogairapi Gamyate Ekam Sankhyam Cha Yogam Cha Yah Pashyati Sa Pashyati. That state which is reached by the Sankhyas is also reached by the yogis. He who sees Sankhya and Yoga as one, he sees the famous words of the Gita. He says, Yah Pashyati Sa Pashyati. Yaha is he, Saha is whoever. Pashyati, Pashyati, twice. He who sees it, means it is something which I can't lend my vision to you, nor can you lend your vision to me. The Guru is saying, I can't lend this perception to you, man. It is not just the mere physical perception. We are talking about an inner vision, an inner dimension to look at things in a clear perspective. So what he is saying here is the Sankhya, the state which is reached by the Sankhyas. What is the state reached by Sankhya's? The Jnani is also reached by the yogis. So don't be disillusioned that you are inferior or superior, whether you're doing the right thing or not. Can the verse be removed, please? Thank you. So they're both going to reach the same thing. Now, all what you've got to understand a little further, a little deeper. As I've said, the Sankhya's are the sannyasis. Another word for sannyasi is Sankhya. Sankhya means the path of knowledge. Now, Sankhya are the sannyasis, are those who are introverted. Now, the yogis are the active people who are the extroverted. This is what is very clear. The extroverted, introverted. Now, the extroverted people, what are they doing? They're all trying to divinize their actions. Spirituality is nothing but divinizing. It's like when you go into a prayer, you take the flowers, let's say, you collect the flowers from your garden. They're just normal flowers. But you go into the puja room and when you offer those flowers as an offering to the Lord, what have you done to the flower? You have divinized the flower, isn't it? So after the flower, the next day when it is dried up, you choose not to put into the dustbin because it is almost like it is divinized, it's prashad. It can't be treated like rubbish. So what you're doing is, an ordinary flower, when it is offered at the feet of the Lord, it becomes divine. Now, similarly, when your actions, my question is, when does your actions become divine vis-a-vis when do they become worldly? When do they become worldly? Just like a flower is neutral. There's nothing divine flower and non-divine flower. No, there's nothing like that, isn't it? The same flower a lady chooses to adorn on her hair, it has a certain value. It has a certain association of thought. The same thing when the pujari gives a flower at the temple, has a certain association of thought. The flower by itself has nothing. It is what you associate with it. So it is not that there are certain spiritual actions, they are not that as a material actions. It is all about your association with that action. So the question is, when does your action become divine, or to use the language of the Gita, demoniac, means worldly, gross? When does it become? Ramana Garu, when does an action become divine?
When you offer, when you do the things selflessly, it's a divine activity.
You're going to your office, or now you may be working from home, but let's say
Yeah, I'm
going to
working.
office. How do you make that work divine? When you have an irritating boss, unrealistic demands, so many things are not right. How do you divinize that work?
I'll be doing my duty, like whatever, maximum not hurting anybody, doing my things to the best of my effort.
Correct. Okay. Not wrong. Not wrong. I'm just trying to trigger certain things here. Yes. Anybody? How do you convert your action into divinity? A few comments have come in. It is when your actions are selfless, it's the intention. When you offer it as a yajna, what can I contribute to the betterment of the organization? Non-attachment, the spirit of service and sacrifice. When you involve yourself, unselfish, when you consider it as an offering, when one attaches worldly sensory benefits for the actions, it becomes worldly. Correct. When one offers it as a sacrifice to the higher goal, it becomes divine. So when you take away the selfishness, the attachment, and the egoistic notion to the work, instantly the work becomes divine. So remove that makes, say it is nothing, you don't have to add anything to it. You remove it. See, spirituality is not gaining something. Spirituality is undoing it. If you have to gain something, means the suggestion or the implication is you don't have it, isn't it? There's nothing that you have to gain it. That thou art, you are that truth. You already got it in you. It is just that you accumulated dirt and imperfections for a while. So when the imperfections are dropped, the work automatically becomes divine. Now, what you got to understand is, an extroverted person is trying to use organs of action to divinize his spiritual path. And an introverted person is using organs of perception to divinize his spiritual path. Just write these statements as it is, and then we'll clarify it. An extroverted person is using or divinizing his organs of action. Vis-a-vis, an introverted person is divinizing his organs of perception. Because why do we say an extrovert person is using organs of action? Vis-a-vis, why do we say an introvert person is using organs of perception? It is just because it is directly related to the desires. Remember the example or the concept we have given of receipt, reaction, response. When the world sends in stimuli, when there's a reaction within, there are responses back into the world. When the world sends in stimuli and there is no reaction within your desires, there are no responses back into the world. So when there are more responses back into the world, you are a man of action. When there are less responses back into the world, you are a man of contemplation. I've already said this before. Are you all able to follow? Can you give a thumbs up? Those of you who are following, those who are not following. I don't see anybody raising thumb. Unless I need to go and change my eyesight. Srimati Ma, are you following?
I said I need to hear it again, Guruji, because I want to make sure.
You need to hear it live, or you want me to, you will do
Hear it
rewind
again.
later on and.
No, hear it again. If you could repeat it, please.
Oh, so it is, I need to repeat, not the rewind process of the recording. Okay.
Either way, I'll have to go back and listen.
Okay. Now, the statement I made is,
Yeah.
spirituality is not about the action. Spirituality is about divinizing whatever you're doing. We said a man of introversion, which is a sannyasi, is using the organs of perception more. So he has to divinize his organs of perception. Whereas an extroverted person is engaging his action. So he has to divinize his organs of action. Now, for example, I got to the center, the second round this morning. My first round in the morning coming to the center was at 4:30 in the morning. I was already here 4:30 in the morning doing my sadhana, whatever. Then I came back at 10 o'clock. And as I walked in, the weather was so perfect, so beautiful, nice and clouded, nice, pleasant breeze. So I said, I would want to just sit out there with my books for an hour or so. I just sat out in the porch, just looking at the greenery, just listening to the birds, enjoying the passing breeze, taking a note or two. What was I doing? I'm engaging my organs of perception, isn't it? So when I'm engaging my organs of perception, what am I doing? Either I can get lost in the organs of perception. If I get lost in the organs of perception, what am I? Harishji, if one gets lost in the organs of perception, what are they?
You're a man of the world. You're a worldly person, attached person.
You're a worldly person, sensual person. You're just charmed by the world. But when you use the same organs of perception to think of the higher, the perception reminds you of the higher. What a beautiful creation. Look at that flower, such a beautiful art of creation. You look at an insect or a bug, you just look at nature, how beautiful it is. The moment you look at something that is created, you look at the wonderment in the creation, you're thinking about the creator, the man who was behind all this. There's some power beyond that which is controlling everything, which is enabling everything, which is beautifully synchronizing. There's a harmony in everything out in nature. When you are able to attune to that force behind, what am I doing? Am I not using my organs of perception, thinking of the higher? That act of withdrawing from the world, using your sense of perception to think of the higher, you are an introverted person. But if an extroverted person, he'll have to be running around, he'll have to be doing a lot of things because there's so many things to do. He is pushed out into the world because of his desires and vasanas. He's more action oriented. Then what he does, he has to engage his organs of action more to divinize his action. That's an extrovert person vis-a-vis an introvert person. This is what I said. And whether you become an extrovert or introvert, it depends on your desires. Okay. Is that good enough for now? Any more rewinding, pausing, fast forwarding? Okay. Play button now. Play button. ठीक है. Yes, Hemalata ma.
I wanted to say something. Actually, I have 2 points to make. The first one is an answer to this. I feel making a work, divinizing a job is not like me. For example, I'm a teacher and I love that job. I like to be with the children. And all of a sudden, my organization wants me to go out, do a road show so that you can do a lot of, marketing work. And I'm asked to sell a product. I really don't like it. But then I start liking it because there is a human interaction there. That divinize the action? Will it make me, I really feel good. Okay, I have sold whatever it is. Even if I am not sold, I start liking the action. Will the action become divinized? That is one question.
Let me take one by one.
Okay.
When you say this, in fact, I can resonate to it very well because I am zero marketing person.
Yes.
If you know, I don't think you know any bit of me, but if you have gathered, if you interact with me, you'll know I will not market anything. So if somebody wants to come and take it, they can take it, and I'll give my entire life teaching that knowledge to that person. But I will not go and market it and say there's something valuable. Why don't you get it? Why don't you take it?
Yes.
And yet, a certain responsibility or role which I had to do earlier demanded me that I had to do a lot of field work, which means had to go out to promote this knowledge for a certain bracket of people or whatever, But I found myself, I'm far more comfortable being a teacher than a marketeer.
Yes.
I'm just so comfortable just being with the books, even if I'm not teaching. I'm very comfortable reading, so comfortable trying to make my notes, trying to understand, try to decode this. That is me. But yet it demanded me that I had to go out into the organize events, do workshops, wherever for an institution I represented before. But when I did that, I did as an offering to my guru. I gave everything I can. There were things you not believe to what extent I had gone to ensure that an event for my guru had to be done, and to what extent I left no stone unturned. I'll give you 2 examples. Now, this was an event where we are trying to organize a corporate, to get the corporates involved for a program, for a workshop for my guru. Now, he was coming to, this was in Malaysia, where I was there for a long time and organizing things. And one such event, we are trying to get to connect to people. And through some known source, I was a well-wisher who said, when I come, I will connect you with people. And he was a very, very, a man of great standing, and he had connections. But due to some personal incident in his life, he is almost paralyzed. So he was in a wheelchair, which meant that he used to drive the vehicle, but he said, Vinay, there is a very important event where the who's who of the country are coming. And there was this marriage of the Berjaya group. Just Google and find out, BERJYA. The Berjaya group in Malaysia. He is the or one of the richest in Malaysia. And he said, I am being invited for a dinner, and I am going to be in one of the top tables, So, and I can take one person with me, and you come along with me. And I was sitting on the table that day with the Sultan, which is the main royalty of the country. There were 8 people on the table. And next to my table was the Prime Minister and his wife. And you are moving that day. It was like a huge ballroom. There was all this free flow. And all these people are the real who's who of the country and the world. And they are looking at me. Who is this young Indian fellow whom we have never known. What is he? Where is it coming from? What is his portfolio? They want to know, because that's where it's all just, they're all very familiar. You don't find strangers in that zone. And I believe me, when to that and would you ask me, would I be comfortable in a 3-piece suit? I can't be going in a veshti there, in a Muslim country. So I had to be in a 3-piece suit, wear the shoes, get yourself presentable, and try to be one amongst them. What was my only objective? My only objective is, who can I get to the seminar by my guru? Only objective. And that event went right up to 1 o'clock at night, and just sitting there, just waiting, just seeing how can, and he'll say, Vinay, wait, hey, go and contact that fellow. That guy is a very big fellow. Just go and give in your card. Give my card along with your card. I'll do the rest. And that man used to connect me with people. I am completely anti. And yet I did it. I know what it is. But it all was done without a thought of complaint nor a word of disgust. It was full of joy, because I'm doing with the seva bhava. I'm serving the cause. I'm serving the Lord. I'm serving the higher. Second example is, there was one fellow who was well known to me, and we knew each other. But every time event comes every year, he will say, yes, I will pick up a couple of tables and my company will participate. Once and twice this fellow, 2 years passed by, he never turned up. But we kept meeting and something. That year he said, Vinay, this year I am coming. Take my word. The event is coming close. Our friend is not confirmed anything, and we have to close the thing, because it's all, we have to make the event happen. We have commitments to the hotel, and we want to do this. And then I realized, okay, this fellow, every time I call him, he'll say, I'm not in the company. I'm on a meeting there. I'm in office, out of office and things. So that day, one day I went 1 hour before his usual time of arrival, when it comes. At a distance in the car park, I waited in the car waiting and looking at that office whether this fellow has arrived, because I know which car he drives. waiting, and this fellow comes at 9 o'clock to the office. 9:15, I call him. Hey, how are you? Have you come to the office? Hey, I'm sorry. I'm not in office yet. I have a busy day. Can we catch up sometime later? After 15 minutes later, I just go and knock at the office door and say, I'm just passing by, just took a chance just to drop by and just pass this note to you. Believe me, that fellow came. He was compelled to.
Compelled to come.
And he has so much respect for me. He said he wouldn't say no. But see, waiting in the car park for 1 hour just to get to that guy, to what length, to what extent you would go. Not torture, great pleasure. I
In
would
general,
not an ounce of complaint. I'm proudly saying, because I know I did with great service and sacrifice to serve the cause. But is that me? No, that is not me. If situation demands you to do it, you will do it. So if you are in a position like that, you should. Why not? But ultimately, you will do what is innate to you.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd love to do that. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
The second question is, you said we should reduce the desires. For me, the only desire is I should advance in my spiritual path and attain realization. Is that a bad desire? Is that a wrong desire? This kind of question comes to me often. Now, there are people asking me this question. I really want to know, what is your take on it?
No, see, first and foremost, please understand that you can't get rid of desires. It's not something,
Yes.
it's like a dog has a bath and it can just shake its body, and then
Mm-hmm.
all the extra water, it just sheds off. It's not something you can just shed yourself of all the excess surplus desires and all. The desires can never be dropped. I request you and all to drop the thought of dropping the desire. First, drop the thought of dropping, because you cannot drop it. Vasanas, a desire, can never be dropped. All what you can do is pick up a higher vasana, pick up a greater desire. So when you pick up a greater desire, when you evolve into a greater echelon, you greater into a greater status, the lower desires and the lower vasanas automatically drop away. So it is all a question of a natural progression of growing above them, growing beyond them. And you can only grow beyond them when you appreciate a certain value.
Okay.
So it is not a question of dropping anything. So when you know that you don't have a value for certain things in the world, but you deep innately have a certain value for the higher, there's nothing wrong about it. In fact, desire for self-realization is known as, the desire for realization is known as mumukshatva. In fact, we will soon get into the text Atma Bodha, and in that he talks of it. Mumukshatva is known as the desire for liberation. And that one desire, that one transcendental desire actually replaces all other worldly desires.
True. Very true.
So you need to hold on to that desire, and blessed if any one of you, and you have this very strong thought of desire for spiritual evolution or realization, blessed art thou. But how many people have that thought? Hardly anybody has it. This thought or this desire for realization is actually like a needle in a haystack. It is lost. So if this thought comes and keeps pricking you and bothering you, hold on to the needle. Let it keep pricking and bothering you. It ensures that you don't get attached to anything lower.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay. Got it. Thank you very much.
Most welcome. And Krishna Swami sir, all okay, wa? Namaskaram. At last we are able to see you all. Namaskaram. So, Namaskaram Hari sir, Solunga sir.
Guruji, Hari Om.
Hari Om, Solunga.
Can we say even Lord Krishna had the desire that that Arjuna should wake up and fight against Duryodhana and his team and ensure that they defeat them and Dharma is reestablished? Can we not say that he had also that sattvic desire?
Sir, now I'm afraid of you.
Why?
With the look of it, you're planting desire into Lord Krishna also. I don't know what you might plant something into me also now.
Yeah, you have a desire to teach us and see that we become sattvic desire. That definitely, why not?
Sir, let's say I wrap up this class for good.
Why, sir?
Chumma, discussion sake, because you are planting a desire in me, na? For discussion sake, I wrap up this class, let's say. Will not.
My question is, what is...
I'm answering the question, sir.
Yes, sir.
Let's say I wrap up this class and I guarantee you, you can put me through any test you want. There will not be an ounce of botheration that the class has stopped, and let's initiate it. Let us restart it. Let us serve this knowledge. There will not be an ounce of thought in me. Don't judge a person by the action. Just because I'm teaching, you are saying I have a desire to teach. I could be purely doing this act on obligation. I'm performing my action without a desire to do it. I'm doing karyam karma. Such actions are known as selfless actions. We have taken this word selflessly so lightly, we don't understand the grandness of the action. When an action is done with a selfish motive, it's a selfish action. When an action is done with an unselfish motive, an unselfish action. When an action done with no motive, it's called selfless action. I have no motive to teach this knowledge to you all. I am only teaching because I have bound myself through certain obligation to convey this message. If you choose not to come, if you choose to come, I have no bearing on it. But yet, as I'm concerned, I'm not driven on action. Let's say, sir, if I'm driven on desire to teach, and if there are no takers of this knowledge, what would it do to me?
We will keep on trying. We will keep on trying.
Trying is one thing, but I'm saying, sir, I'm still not lost hope, so I'm still teaching you all.
Yes.
So
We-
I'm still putting my effort. Irrespective of the numbers, I've been putting my effort. But my question is, if I have a desire to teach, and the desire is very noble desire, as you said, sattvic desire. If I have a desire to teach, to serve these people, and if there are not many takers, what would it do to me? Would it not be disappointed? Because what I want, I'm not interested in anything out of you. I just want to give this knowledge, and yet there are no takers. And if there are no takers, what would it do to me? Would it not be disappointed? Yes or no, sir? Because my desire is not met. Even though you have an unselfish desire, it can lead you to a lot of disappointment and dissatisfaction because your desire is not met. So when a guru, and you're talking of a Jagat Guru, Lord Krishna himself,
Yeah.
Krishna did not have any desire to teach Arjuna. And yet he did his duty because Arjuna surrendered to Krishna. Krishna did all what he had to do to help him. That's about all. There is neither a desire to do anything, nor a desire not to do anything. And yet that state of selflessness is you are constantly in action, because the moment you stop acting, it is death. So try to elevate thought where you can get on to a zone or a mode of action where you have no desire at all. You're just doing your duties. So I'm just doing my duty. I don't have any motive to teach. And yet I will continue to teach right through my life, but I don't have a desire to teach. If I have a desire, then I'll have preferences. I prefer this and I prefer that, and I have a certain expectation, certain fruits. As long as you take that motive out of the equation, your actions are selfless.
When would you call it as a desire? In one of the classes, you have used the term desireless desire. If I rightly remember that term, desireless desire.
Yeah, in fact, as I was answering Hemlata Ma, I said that desire for self-realization is a desire, but it is a desireless with reference to the world. It is a desire with reference to the self. It is desireless with reference to the worldly desires. I don't have anything worldly in it, but yet it is a desire to get to the self. So this desire for self-realization alone is called a desireless desire, a selfless desire. Otherwise, there is no desire at all. So the word desireless desire only fits into the desire for self-realization. All right?
Thank you very much.
Most welcome, Ji.
This was.
I'm sorry. 1 minute, Ji. Yeah.
I pray that you would not have taken my question as in the way that I was arguing. No, it was not an argument. It
No,
was,
no. My only concern was you planted desire into Lord Krishna, which I said,
No.
please let's not do. Because there's no question about it. We
no,
can't.
no,
We should
it
not.
was a genuine.
No, I understand,
Yeah.
but it's not possible. So I'm only trying to create that possibility of an action being selfless. The very same action can be selfish also. It all depends on the motive, as we have
Yeah.
said. If you are only doing it as a duty, it is selfless. And that also, if it is done for self-realization, then it's selfless. It has to be done for the highest objective or highest goal in life. That is when actions become selfless. Anything below that is selfish or unselfish.
Thank you.
Right, Ji. Sitaram Ji, did you have something to say? We can't still hear you, sir. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I was wanting to say was that when you're talking of desires, unless you have desires, there are no actions. An action requires to have a desire. So that being the case, To say that, one should be free of desires, like you rightly said, it happens only when you're at the end, when there's no desire left because you can't act, or you can't act, hence you have no desires. So desire is, I think, a part and parcel of everyday living, which has to be accepted. The only thing is that you must elevate it to a higher level. The motive behind the desire, I think that's what we can try and achieve. Like I said, you cannot drop desires per se, because there's no action after that. It's only death.
I don't think you're asking, you're making a statement. So
Yeah,
let the statement be.
Yeah, I made a statement. You're right.
Yeah.
On the basis of what you just mentioned, I thought I'll see whether my understanding is correct or not.
Now you're asking.
Yes, no, I'm asking.
No, because I don't want to force these thoughts or ideas, but I respect your view. Sir, you must appreciate that an action is prompted either by the mind or the intellect. The body is that which is being prompted. But when an action is prompted by the mind, mind operates on desires. And the mind can be selfish or unselfish. Okay? I have a desire to give. I have a desire to serve. That's also a desire. That's still under the mind, the purview of the mind. And then there is another faculty which we have understood is the intellect. So intellect also can prompt your body into action. And intellect operates on obligations, duties, and responsibilities. That is not driven on a desire. You have a duty as a father, you have a duty as a husband, you have a duty as a member of a certain organization, you have a duty as a citizen. You like it or not, you may desire it or not, you have to do it. It may fall under a purview of where you had a desire. Now you had a desire, you got married. You had a desire, you had a child. Now that is all right. Now having had a child or having married, thereafter you are bound by the obligation to that field, isn't it? Thereafter you don't operate on your mind anymore. You only operate on duty. Sir, I have this knowledge which has to be shared. Just because I have something to give, do I go on acting on my mind? Can I act on my impulses? Or do I be driven on what am I duty bound? And each occasion has a certain duty. And I need to do it to the best of my ability so that my action is perfect. And that doesn't mean that there is any desire in it. I'm just doing my duty. So I go in clean, I come out clean. I don't carry any impressions. There are no mental impressions to that action. So we have to understand that an action is possible without a desire. And that actions are driven by the intellect. So when you're going on a highway, when you see another car broken down and that person is struggling to fix the vehicle, you just pull up and you go and ask, excuse me, can I be of any help to you? I ask you, do you have a desire to help? You would say, no, I felt obliged just to offer my help. I found it's a certain duty on me. I felt uncomfortable just to drive past, knowing that that person could be struggling. There's no necessary that there is a desire or a motive in it. It's an act where you just want to do what you're duty bound. Now, where is a desire in it? Is it not possible? So we have to ensure that keep purifying the motive that we tend to carry. Now, the fact that we have been functioning so heavily on motives, now we can't even conceive a possibility of an act without a motive. Why should you have a motive to an action? Why can't an action be done for the sake of itself? That is the beauty and grandeur of an action, is action for action's sake. When a child does something, a child has no motive. It's pure, isn't it? It's innate. It is in its own nature. It just does what it has to do. Similarly, when you spiritually evolve, they say you become like a child. You just do an act for its own sake. You are removing the motive out of the equation. Even if it means an unselfish, remember, even unselfish motive is binding. As far as spiritually concerned, it doesn't really matter whether you have selfish desires or unselfish desires. Remember the example the other day I was taking of an aircraft which is loaded with metal rods, lead plates. Whether you put bars of gold, the Reserve Bank of India is relocating or shifting all its gold reserves from one location to other. So it has a special aircraft which is carrying all the gold from one location to other. So the entire gold reserve is being lifted off. Even it could be gold bars, it is still dead weight. Or it could be lead bars, it's still dead weight. Lead bars is like selfish desires and selfish motives. Gold bars are like unselfish desires and unselfish motives. Both pin you down to the earth. You can't take off. Therefore, in the Gita, in fact, the very backdrop of the Gita is the Bhagavad Gita. Where was it given? Where was the Bhagavad Gita given? Setramanji, where's the location of the GPS Vodongo?
Neutral area.
Neutral area. What is a neutral area means what?
No war zone and where in between the both parties.
The Gita was given in between the battlefield, in between where the Kauravas and the Pandavas were gathered. If you visualize the picture of Lord Krishna sermonizing to Arjuna, who kneeled down looking up to the Lord, the sermon happened. The chariot was in between. Senayor Bhayor Madhye. Please, Krishna says, please take the chariot. Or in fact, Arjuna says, please take the chariot between two armies. And then he got emotional and the conversation was struck. So the knowledge is given, the spiritual path is devoid of punya and papa. Punya, apunya, vivarjita pantaha. In the Bhaja Govindam we learned, isn't it? So Sitaramji, I hope you're following me.
If I may tell you what I have understood.
Yes, please.
The action can arise out of desires. It can also arise out of the duties, etc., which are governed by the intellect.
Yes.
So those are the kinds of action that we need to strengthen and act upon, and reduce those actions which are arising out of the desires, which are essentially selfish in nature.
Oh, it's not necessarily essentially selfish. As
No,
I said,
the
your mind
desire
can...
arising out of desires from the mind rather than those which come from the intellect.
No, even a mind also can have an unselfish thought, isn't it? It can have. The mind is pure. It can always be. Why do we don't have to demonize the mind. Mind is not demonical in nature. The mind also can have a pure thought, can't it? It's like mind entertains a pure emotion of love and charity and gratitude and thankfulness. Is it not the mind?
Yes.
The mind also is greed, envy, lust, anger, hatred. That also is the mind. So the mind has both. It houses both. But desires, it's the warehouse of desire. The mind is the warehouse of desires. And we have got a warehouse full of desires. That's a problem. So it becomes rather challenging to constantly keep checkmating the mind. Every time the mind starts jumping, you got to say, calm down, calm down. I'll have none at thy hands. It's almost to say, no, and go to the ideal. The intellect tells you, this is the path. This is the chosen direction. You got to do this, not what your mind is drawing you away from it. Okay? So the state which is reached by the Sankhyas is very much reached by the yogis as well. He who sees Sankhya and Yoga as one, he sees. Yeah, Pashyati, Sapashyati. Okay? Verse 6. Sanyasastu mahabaho Dukhamaptumayogatah yoga yukto munir brahma nachirenadhigacchati sanyasastu mahabaho dukhamaptumayogatah yoga yukto munir brahma nachirenadhigacchati. Here he says, but the word tu, sannyasas tu is but. In any discussion, we always have this but, no? That but comes here. But renunciation, O Mahabaho, is hard to attain without yoga. A sage well established in yoga attains Brahman ere long. Yoga yukto munih Brahma. Munihi, a sage who is established in yoga, attains along Nachirena Adhigachati. He goes there. Nachirena Adhigachati. And the important message here is renunciation is hard to attain without yoga. Now, why does he say that? Yes, sir. Why does he say renunciation is hard to attain without yoga? You may ask me, sir, that is your duty to tell. Why are you asking us? Huh? I'm just trying to engage you all, please. Annapurnama, why do you think renunciation is difficult to attain without getting established in yoga?
Because to attain a higher goal, one need to have control and discipline, which is demanded by yoga.
Okay, what do you understand by yoga here?
Discipline, self-control,
Yoga
and to be
is-
an introvert.
Okay, yoga is certainly certain discipline and self-control, but I don't know whether it is the introvert here. Because you remember, we just said introverted people are the sannyasis. The extroverted
But
people are the yogis.
they aim for a higher goal.
Yes. Let's say renunciation is a higher goal.
Yeah. Yes.
But then you can't reach that state of introvertedness or renunciation without using action.
Yoga.
Yoga. So why is action important to reach renunciation? Anybody else?
One needs to be actively participating in one's duties, karmas. Then only one can aspire to get elevated spiritually.
But yes, you are actually explaining the statement, which the question we're asking. But why is it that way? Your understanding is clear, but why is it that way? Okay, anybody else? Yes, Hemalatama.
Actually, we cannot be without doing any action. We have to keep acting. It's a part of our personality. You know, we do some action, we do some bhakti. The other day you were telling on Wednesday that we are a combination of all the three. We have bhakti, we have some detachment, we have a lot of action. So the percentage is what matters. So it is not as if we can do away with one. So karma is needed, yoga is needed. When we talk here of yoga, it is only action-based karma. It is not about the exercise, the physical hatha yoga. It is about the action with detachment, or action without any special attachment, or action with a selfish motive. That is not the action we are talking about. We are talking about an action that gives us a purification of the mind so that you can attain a higher level. So that is what I feel. It has to be there. You just cannot be, lying down or doing nothing at all. So action is very important. That's my feeling about it.
Correct. Very well said. In fact, it is what we got to understand is it is not Hatha Yoga. It is what we're talking of. Hatha Yoga is that physical yoga you do, standing on your
Yes.
head, stretching your limbs, breathing, all that kind of exercises. We're not talking of that. In fact, these are one of the verses which is misunderstood. Therefore, they fall back on these mantras like this and say, therefore do yoga. Yoga is not standing on your head when you have two legs to stand on. I don't understand that. No, you do stand on your head also if you have to, but please stand straight first. It is not the physical part. It is the spirit of acting with a level of detachment, as you rightly said. But it's still the underlying aspect is not addressed. I'm still probing for that. Yeah, Srimati Ma.
This is how I'm looking at it, Guruji. I agree with Hemalata in that to that extent that we can't be like lumps of clay, when we are saying no action. But action in this case, I think once I remember you once said that we need to sharpen our mind, and the intellect is what sharpen the intellect, which helps us to discriminate and to differentiate. And I have a feeling it is while we are doing these actions, that's when we can reflect on them and discriminate between what was selfish and what was unselfish, and what was the intention of everything, which ultimately I'm hoping will help us to differentiate between the two and say to discard those that are not conducive to going further. Unless you do the action, how will you know? How will you realize what's going on?
Okay. Fine. Okay. All right, Ma. Let me hear from others. Tinky Ma. Hariji, just a minute. Hariji, okay? Yeah.
Yeah. So, who's speaking? Okay. All actions should be powered. One is we need to act. We can't not act. The other is that when actions need to be prompted by the intellect, so that we use the power of, vivekshilta, discrimination, to do what is the right thing, do your duty or obligation. It's nothing to do whether you want to do it or not. You do it, and do it with the spirit of yajna. And when that becomes your way of being, then you keep moving further up on the path towards self-realization. That is my understanding.
Now, having got a couple of feedbacks, I'm coming, Hariji. See, the Shastras, whenever they use the word action, they only know one action, which is
yoga.
They do not know of any other action. So when you say action, unselfish, intellect, yajna, sacrifice, all is understood, because they do not know of any selfish action. Now having understood that it has to be as an action of that nature, why is action important? So I think all of you have said around it, about it, but not what is the main takeaway. Okay, so let me hear from Hariji, and thereafter I'll clarify.
In the initial verses, it has been told that both the renunciation and the yoga, they are of the same path. And so it is not a separate path, it is the same path. But the yoga is required to purify the mind, to complete the first stage of the path, which will automatically take us to the second stage. So yoga is unavoidable to purify the mind and to make the mind matured to take us to the second level. It is the same path.
Correct. It is the same path. You need to purify the mind and make it worthy to reach a state of vairagya, which is renunciation. In fact,
Renunciation and meditation.
yeah, and there follows meditation. But yeah, you've said it very closely. But the what is the purification of the mind? So what purifies the mind is to reduce the desires. So why should you not abandon action is because the desires are very much underlying.
Yeah.
So you need to practice yoga, which is karma yoga. Karma yoga takes care of the bulk of your desires. When the bulk of your desires are gone, then you become lighter and you're elevated to sannyasa. So karma yoga is
unavoidable.
Not a question of unavoidable. You have to do. You have to go through from nursery and then only you go to PhD. Na? You have never gone to nursery or standard 1 and 2. You want to go into a state of PhD and research. You can't do that. So you use action. You plow through action to get rid of the desire which binds action. So you can't get rid of desire by abandoning action. So you have to use action to drop the desire which binds action. And once the bonding element is removed, is dropped, then you go to the next level.
To roast the seed.
There's a poetic way of putting it. But so if you abandon action, if you abandon karma, what will happen is the desire still lurks. So karma, in fact, karma or action or selfless service is an integral part of one sadhana. Integral. Coming Wednesday, try to log in, be there, because I will expand on the concept of that kuruvavadhanam mahadavadhanam. The concept of keeping the proportion in mind, and why is that all three parts are integral in one's spiritual journey. You can't choose one from the other, and you need to integrate all the three parts and yogas to be able to serve you well. Now, since we mentioned of the three yogas, let me mention what do these three yogas do with reference to the desires. So just a matter of information, we'll come to it if required. You can clarify it, think about it. Karma yoga takes care of the quantity of desires. Karma yoga deals with the quantity of desires. Bhakti yoga deals with the quality of your desires. Jnana yoga gives a direction to your desires. So this is how the three yogas influence the desire. Karma yoga takes care of the quantity, bhakti takes care of the quality, and the jnana yoga gives a direction to the desires. And that is how you find they all play a role in your purification, because purification is to get rid of the desires. Okay? Yeah, Annapurnama?
Guruji, one doubt. All souls go through the cycle of birth and death because of prarabdha karma. At what stage, or is it through the first stage yoga we do away with our karmas, vasanas?
I don't understand, ma. Could you?
Is it all souls are born because of karma, prarabdha karma, whatever? Yoga is necessary to also do away with the karma because of which we keep taking rebirths.
Okay. Now, yoga has got nothing directly to do with rebirth. A person is born if you have vasanas left with you. So the path of spiritual journey is to keep dropping the desires and vasanas. So as and when you spiritually evolve, the bulk of desires keep dropping. And there will be birth until there is no desire. Even if you have one desire, you will be born to exhaust that.
Thank you, Guruji.
All right. Yes. Yes, Hariji, quickly.
Guruji, you happen to talk about the next Wednesday, about the 3 yogas. If you could clarify it next Wednesday, the role of intellect in Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, I would be very grateful. Because we sometimes say intellect plays only in case of Jnana Yoga. But even in case of Bhakti Yoga or in Karma Yoga, the role of intellect, that whether a man with a weak intellect, can he be a strong Karma Yogi or a strong Bhakti Yogi? Jnana Yoga, I am able to understand, because it is connected with intellect, that it is Jnana. But even when I am sitting and when I am thinking and reflecting, even a bhakti, a person like Meera, who was totally involved in bhakti, even does she need a strong intellect?
Sir, I just to quickly clarify.
Yeah.
Jnana,
I expressed myself.
No, I got you very clearly. So Jnana Yoga is designed for people whose intellect is more pronounced, whose intellect is more predominant.
Yeah.
Bhakti is designed for those whose mind is more pronounced. Karma is meant for where there's a balance of mind and intellect. So in any action, the mind and intellect has to participate. So there has to be a balance or integration of these two. So this is how you can't say a bhakta has any role of intellect. There is no role of intellect in a bhakta, because he's predominantly emotional. He doesn't have the rational element which an intellectual has. So karma is when there's a balance of head and heart. That's when you do karma, action, where you feel for what you do. You have a love for what you do. And you also understand it's the right thing to do. So there's a mix of head and heart. Isn't it? You have a feeling also. You like to do it. You love to do it. That is the heart element. And then you also understand it's my duty to do it, the intellect. And that's when action comes in. Okay, just keep this in mind, because you don't have to drag the intellect into bhakti. It doesn't directly play a role. All right, sir. Think about it. If required, we will again take it up next Wednesday. Okay.
Thank you.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.